For years, Samantha Carter believed her child had died the day she was born. But the truth was stolen from her. The Watchers Council made sure of that. That child was taken, hidden, raised in Boston with no memory of the mother who never stopped grieving. That child grew up to be Faith Lehane, a slayer born into darkness. Now, on the run from the past, Faith unknowingly crosses into her mother's world. When SG-1 defends her from a Watchers Council hit squad, a single blood test shatters everything. A mother and daughter, separated by magic, war, and destiny, are about to be reunited. This is Born into Darkness by FM Fan 1980, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Stargate SG-1 crossover fanfiction. Sit back, relax, and enter a world where sci-fi and supernatural collide. Children's Memorial Hospital, Colorado Springs, Colorado, 16 years earlier. Dr. Peyton Reed was an obstetrician of an interesting caliber. He was not only a licensed medical professional, he was also one of the Watchers Council of Britain's prolific procurers of potential slayers who were still infants. A job at which he excelled due to the arsenal of magic spells at his disposal. Magic spells, some of which were useful in making people see what he wanted them to see, hear what he wanted them to hear, to overtake all of their senses in order to accomplish his goals. This day, the council sent him to Colorado Springs to procure a baby from a 16-year-old girl. A baby that a seer at one of the many covens in the United States claimed had the potential to be one of the strongest slayers if ever activated. After the council did a background search on the baby's mother and her family, they came to the decision that the baby had to be spirited away. The family, the father, son, and the daughter, were a military family, with the father serving in the United States Air Force. The council would not accept a slayer being under the command of any nation's military. They were absolutely certain a potential slayer in a military family would, eventually, join the military. A slayer is the tool of the council, the head of the Watchers Council of Great Britain, Quentin Travers, had said to his fellow Watchers, the council's, no one else's. He was the one who sent Dr. Reed to Colorado Springs to take the baby away, a job that the lifetime member of the council was glad to perform. To Dr. Reed, the protection of the council and its adherence to history and prophecy was all that mattered. The council protected the world, and the slayers were its instruments in ensuring the world kept on spinning. As the doctor strode towards the delivery suite, he passed several nurses and midwives. Once he reached his destination, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath before entering the room with a smile. "Good afternoon," Reed said, looking at the frightened blonde-haired, 16-year-old girl who had a woman in her early 40s holding onto her hand. Next to the woman was a nurse writing down readings from a monitor onto a chart. Reed looked down at his clipboard and then up at the young woman again. "My name is Dr. Peyton Reed. I'm afraid your regular obstetrician has met with an accident. I was sent in as his last-minute replacement." The doctor smiled at the cover story, which also happened to be true. The girl's regular obstetrician did meet with an accident where he was not killed, but injured enough that he not could be in the delivery suite that day. The council's original plan was to have him injured during a mugging attempt, but the accident was enough for them. Later, the council pulled some strings and had Reed take over for the original doctor. "What?" exclaimed the woman, "is he all right?" Before Reed could answer, the young blonde screamed as she leaned forward. The woman then yelled out, "Doctor!" "Oh boy," said Reed as he put his clipboard down and rushed up to the young blonde woman. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you and your baby." "Thanks," whispered the young woman, panting for a few seconds before wincing. "The pain. It hurts." "You'll be fine, the baby will be fine," said the woman as she fed the blonde some ice chips. "It's going to be all right, Sammy." "Aunt Betty, please don't tell Daddy," the young woman whispered. "Sammy," said Betty, "he'll want to." "I don't want to disappoint him," yelled the blonde before screaming in pain once again. She then calmed down, leaned back panting for breath, and repeated herself, "He'll be returning from his deployment in a few months, so please don't tell him anything. Promise me you'll look after her. After my baby, please." "Sammy," said Betty as she looked at her niece, "I already promised I would." "Please," begged the blonde, "please, please, please." I will, honey, I will, nodded Betty as she wiped the sweat off the young woman's brow, but you need to pick a name for her. Ellie, said the blonde, Ellie. Okay, said Dr. Reed before giving the nurse some orders, and then looking up at the blonde, it's about time for Ellie, is it? Yes, the blonde replied, yes, short for Eleanor, after my mother. My sister, added Betty as Dr. Reed nodded his head. Samantha, it's time for Ellie to meet the world, said Dr. Reed as he reached between the young woman's legs and looked up at her with his mask-covered face. I need you to push when I tell you to. All right, said the blonde before she screamed. It would be some time later that the baby was out, however, by the time Dr. Reed could see the head crowning, he whispered the appropriate spell. A spell that silenced the baby's cries while, at the same time, creating an illusion where the baby wasn't moving. However, only he could hear and see little Ellie moving in his arms while crying out for her mother. What happened? Asked Betty, a tinge of worry in her voice at hearing no cries from the baby. The young woman, panting as well, with sweat beading down her face, also asked why she couldn't hear the baby cry. They watched the nurse and the doctor take the baby to a table where he picked up some instruments. Betty called out, Doctor. Doctor, asked Samantha as tears started to well up in those bright blue eyes when she realized that something was very wrong. Why isn't she crying? Doctor, please, tell me, please. Why isn't she crying? The both of them saw Dr. Reed and the nurse look at each other, and then at the baby before shaking their heads. Doctor, exclaimed the young blonde before she started to sob, holding on to Betty's hand, Doctor. Please, no. The doctor could see the baby crying out on the table before he picked her up and turned around. He saw Betty grab the blonde girl's head and turn it away from the sight before her. After all, to them the baby wasn't moving at all. To them, the baby was dead. Betty held Sam's crying face against her chest while the older woman could only look at the still, unmoving baby with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, said Dr. Reed, but... All Dr. Reed could do was look on as Sam screamed into Betty's chest while the older woman just stared at the baby with tears in her eyes. The illusion surrounding the baby in Reed's arms was so complete that they never noticed, or felt, Ellie moving when the two women wanted to hold on to the baby. I'm sorry, whispered the crying young woman as she gazed at the still baby while Betty wrapped her arms around Sam's shoulders. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I hope you're with your grandmother now. I'm so sorry. All Reed could do was look at the currently cooing baby who looked up at her mother's eyes before she yawned and went to sleep. However, the blonde wasn't able to see any of that, neither was her aunt. Neither was the nurse. It would be several minutes later that Reed brought the baby to the hospital morgue where he handed off the sleeping Ellie to another medical professional who was working for the council. He was the one who switched Ellie's live body for a mystically created, dead facsimile that would withstand any sort of genetic testing for the next few weeks. The both of them knew that the autopsy on the fake, Ellie, would be carried out later that day. And all they would find is a severe heart defect as the cause of the baby's stillbirth. The facsimile of Ellie, along with her death certificate, would be then handed to the family members for burial. And so, the council would have saved another potential slayer from the military. No one from the hospital and family would be aware of what had happened. The council knew that the family would eventually get on with their lives after mourning their baby. You will serve the council one day, little one, said Reed as he looked down at the sleeping baby before handing her off to the other man in the morgue. The man would then take Ellie off to another family, in another city, in another state, complete with a new background and a new name. Reed whispered, in the meantime, have fun in Boston. I hear it's nice this time of year. Sunnydale, 2100 hours, present day. Giles was worried, driving his car past one green light after the other. Even so, he was thankful to whatever higher being was watching over him, and his unconscious passenger, for making the journey to the hospital relatively quick. Glancing at his rearview mirror, the light from the overhead street lamps reflected on an unconscious Faith lying across the back seat badly beaten and bruised. Thankfully she was still breathing, although it sounded labored, and the blood flow from her stab wound had been stopped. His eyes were staring back at the road, the worried watcher gasping for breath just before slamming down on the brakes of his car and screeching towards a red light. The car stopping just inches before he hit the car in front of him. Smelling the stench of burning rubber, Giles tightened his fingers around the steering wheel. Memories flooded back into his brain while he collected himself. He thought back to having discovered the identity of the pure demon the mayor of Sunnydale intended to transform into. He had planned the transformation for Sunnydale High's graduation day. This was the very same demon, the skeleton of which was discovered by Professor Lesterworth buried at the foot of a volcano. The very same Lesterworth who every member of the Scoobies believed Faith had killed on orders of the mayor of Sunnydale. Once Giles and Xander discovered the mayor could be killed after the ascension, he told the young man to go back home and take a break. Giles told Xander he would go to Angel's mansion and take over for Willow and Oz, who were searching for something that could cure Angel from the poison coursing through his body. It was then Giles noticed the look on Xander's face, a look that was trying to come up with some kind of an excuse for the Watcher to not even think about going to the mansion. Giles asked Xander what was going on. And when Xander didn't answer, when he started to speak nervous gibberish, Giles once again demanded to know what was going on. Why was he being so sketchy? It had taken a few minutes for Xander to break and reveal Buffy's plan to save Angel. Giles stood in shock at what he had heard from Xander, that Buffy planned to capture Faith, and then have Angel feed on her. After all, the cure for the poison was the blood of a slayer, so why not Faith's blood, the blood of a rogue slayer, a traitor? I tried to stop her, Xander called out as Giles rushed out of the library. And that was the last thing that ran through his mind as he sped off to Angel's mansion. Once having reached the mansion, he rushed in to find Oz and Willow kissing. They quickly parted once Giles announced his presence. Giles, squeaked Willow, staring at Giles, who should not be at the mansion. Xander was supposed to have stopped him. She then turned to Oz, who held her hand tight, before looking at Giles again and saying, What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be, sleeping? Graduation is coming soon, so we need out rest. Did you know? Asked Giles, staring at Willow, and then at Oz, before asking once again, did either one of you know? I don't, stammered Willow. About Buffy's plan for Faith. Did you know? Giles demanded. Giles, said Oz as he lay his hand on a nervous Willow's shoulder, and gently squeezed to calm her down, it's the only way to save Angel. I don't like this either, but there's no other way to save him. And we need him when we fight the mayor. And Faith's evil, said Willow, Giles glaring at her, while at the same time feeling a sense of disappointment towards the redhead. Buffy is the Slayer, Giles said as he closed his eyes, calmed down, and then continued, the Slayer kills vampires and other monsters. It's the Council, and the Council alone that deals with Slayers. Like it or not, Faith is still human. And if Buffy kills her, she'll be murdering Faith. And you'll be a part of it. Despite how you feel about her, you'd be participating in her murder. That's something that will eat you up from the inside. But, said Willow when the front door slammed open and Giles turned around to see Buffy with a badly beaten Faith over her shoulder. Upon seeing Giles, Buffy stopped and stared at Giles in surprise, before looking at Willow and Oz. Willow squeaked out, Hi. Buff, guess what? Giles found us. Buffy, said Giles approaching her. The Slayer stood her ground, and Giles continued, there is another way to do this. I know you love Angel, but you and I know that this is murder. I'm saving the world, said Buffy as she bumped past Giles, if I have to kill her to save the world, then so be it. Buffy, Oz spoke as he turned around when Buffy strode past them while Willow looked at him in surprise, let me go through the books again. Maybe I can find a cure. Maybe there's instructions to create fake Slayer blood. Oz then turned towards Willow, maybe we haven't searched hard enough. I looked, Willow insisted. But she knew she could have tried harder. But this was Faith they were talking about, she betrayed them all by siding with the mayor. Willow whispered, we've done all we can. I'm sorry. That's that then, said Buffy as she entered the room where Angel was lying near death while Giles looked at Oz and Willow. Get to the library, demanded Giles, get to the library and wait for me there. But, said Willow. Go, yelled Giles as Willow looked on surprised before her lower lip trembled and she turned towards Oz. Oz, said Giles as he rubbed his forehead in frustration. I'll take her, said Oz as he held on to Willow's trembling shoulders. I'm sorry we couldn't do more. Let us hope that Buffy doesn't become a murderer, Giles whispered as he went into Angel's room while Oz led Willow away. Back on the streets of Sunnydale, the light turned green before Giles pressed the accelerator. Once he reached the emergency entrance of the hospital, he honked his car's horn before screeching to a halt. He got out of the car while yelling for help. Giles opened his rear door, carefully carried Faith into his arms before heading towards the emergency entrance. He thought back to the shimmer in Angel's room as he nearly drained Faith off blood. He could recall seeing the other Faith, a different Faith in a red dress, a Faith who said that she was sorry and that she couldn't stay before the shimmer vanished. Who were you? Thought Giles to himself as he strode towards the hospital's emergency room. There was something different. Something softer about her, but still tough, unlike this Faith. Faith, whispered Giles as he carried the Slayer in his arms, you should have come back to us. We would have helped you. You didn't need to go to the mayor. We could have been your family. I don't know what's going to happen now. But I'll be here when you wake up. The ascension is tomorrow, and I think we can win. We have a plan, and in the meantime, this is the safest place for you. Giles burst through the doors of the emergency room as doctors and nurses rushed towards him and helped Faith onto a gurney. I think she has severe blood loss, said Giles as the doctors took over. I found her with a stab wound and she was badly beaten. Okay, said one of the doctors as he pushed Giles out of the way while placing an oxygen mask on her face. What's her name? Faith, said Giles as the doctor glanced at him. I'm not sure of her last name, I'm sorry. The doctor nodded his head before looking down at the Slayer. She'll be in good hands, but you need to stay in, sir. The doctor turned around only to find that Giles was gone. Shaking his head, he turned back towards Faith before issuing orders to the nurses and other doctors. Sunnydale Mercy Hospital, 0500 hours, 2 weeks later. All Faith could hear were beeping sounds as she slowly opened her eyes to find herself in darkness. She tried to move her arms, and while she was able to move one arm to her head and wipe her eyes with the back of her hand, she couldn't move the other arm since it was handcuffed to the railing of the bed where she currently lay. Her eyes already adjusted to the darkness, Faith noticed the medical equipment around her followed by a smell of flowers. Her eyes furrowed, she stared at the flowers, a bouquet of lilies in a transparent vase. She noticed the card in the middle of the bouquet. Must be from Wilkins, thought Faith to herself, her lips forming a small smile. Her head then turned towards the newspaper on the table, next to the flowers, the Ascension. I'm needed therein. I need to go. Wilkins will need me. Faith twisted her healed body and reached for the paper, grabbed it, and then focused on the headline and the date it was published, 2 weeks ago. Sunnydale High destroyed in suspected gas leak, Faith whispered to herself as she read the paper. Mayor Wilkins sacrificed his life to save students. However, he perished with 20 students, 3 administrators, and Principal Snyder in what could only be described as the deadliest accident in Sunnydale history. Faith dropped the newspaper in shock as she recalled what happened the night before the Ascension, Buffy stabbing her, and then beating her. She was unconscious, which was then followed by extreme pain when she felt fangs bite into her skin. It was Angel, she was sure of it. Buffy dragged her off to Angel. She tried to feed me to him, thought Faith to herself before catching sight of a piece of paper sticking out of the newspaper. Faith reached for the paper, slipped it out, and then held it close to her face so that she could make out the words in the dark. It was Buffy's handwriting. Faith pressed her lips together before whispering the message Buffy left her. Hey bitch, guess what, you failed. That feels so good to say. I've got no idea if you will ever wake up, and I hope that you don't. Anyway, left this for you after the school blew up. I wanted you to see what happened to your precious Mayor Wilkins. I'll just say this once. If you happen to wake up and we're not there, then leave. Leave my city. You're not wanted here. Giles was the only one protecting you. The one who thought I was doing the wrong thing dragging your skanky ass to Angel. But I know I wasn't. I'm the Slayer. I saved the world. You tried to destroy it. Since you died for a few minutes after Angel fed on you, Giles says that the Council probably has another Slayer. So, according to him, you're safe. But that's not true. If I see you in my city again, I will kill you myself. You can leave, go to jail, or I kill you. Your choice. I don't really care which one you choose. Faith crumbled the piece of paper in her hand, and squeezed it tight before she pulled her left hand and broke off the handcuffs. You tried to kill me, thought Faith to herself as she pushed down the railing before turning her legs and body around. Her feet were now hanging off the bed as she thought, you tried to feed me to Angel. I did what I did because I was told to, but you did it to save a vampire. As far as I'm concerned, you can go to hell. I've lived my life alone, and I can continue to live my life alone. Faith glanced at the lilies as she stood up on the floor and grabbed the card before opening it. It was from Giles. Be well, Faith. I will be back in a few days. P.S. I know why Buffy wanted to keep the newspaper on the table, but every time I removed it, a new one pops in the next day. I gave up after a week, but I hope you wake up soon. There will be a lot to answer for, and I will try to help you. Faith looked at the card without an expression on her face before she put it back down and headed towards the door to her room. Sorry G-man, thought Faith to herself, I don't need, or want you, or your pity. I'm gone. You and your princess can live it up with your gang. Faith opened the door slowly and saw that the hallway was empty. Smirking, the Slayer opened her door and walked out cautiously before taking cover at a nurse's station until the two police officers who, unknown to Faith, were supposed to be guarding her door, came around the corner. Faith glanced at her closed door after the officers had strolled past her hiding spot before she slowly made her way through the nearby stairwell doors. She needed to get off this floor. However, before she reached the floor for the main lobby, the dark-haired Slayer came across a young woman in the stairwell. And while Faith wasn't one for colorful pastel shirts and skirts, the young woman's clothes looked as if fit her. Faith knocked her unconscious before she could say anything. After taking the unconscious girl's clothes, purse, cap, and car keys, Faith left the girl covered in her own hospital gown. With car keys in hand, Faith rushed down the stairs to the basement parking lot. The girl was coming up from the basement, so it made sense that her car was parked in that parking lot. Reaching the parking lot, Faith pressed the button that would deactivate the car's alarm system. She listened for the familiar car tone indicating deactivation of a car alarm. She listened carefully, and then snapped her head to the left. There you are, smiled Faith as she rushed to the car, nice ride. Well, not really. Alarm system's good though. It let me in, and the good old nurses, or the cops, should find me missing in about an hour or so, and I'll be long gone by then. Faith smiled as the engine turned, after which she picked up the young woman's purse that she had taken. She dumped everything onto the passenger side seat. Really? Asked Faith as she looked at a piece of paper and picked it up. Who the hell keeps their PIN numbers in their purses? But you've got about 200 in cash. I'll take that, and maybe another few hundred from your account. I'll send the purse back to you when I get to where I'm going, which is far, far away. No vampires, and no Hellmouth. I am so sick of this Slayer gig. Faith then pressed down on the accelerator pedal before she drove out of the hospital, and out of the city boundaries. But not before putting the cap low over her head and taking $1,000 out of the young woman's account from an ATM. Before she left the ATM though, Faith stared at the card and bent it into half before showing off the bent card to the ATM camera. She then ripped the card in half and threw it away. Now, with $1,500 in cash, Faith made her way as far as she could before stopping the car at the side of the road to look at a map in the car's glove box. Nevada, said Faith to herself, the map spread out against the steering wheel, nah. Las Vegas would be a mecca for demons. San Francisco, nope, same problem as Las Vegas. How about Los Angeles? Hell no. How about Kansas? It's possible. Portland, maybe. How about Boise? Possible. Never heard Diana say that there are demons or vampires in Idaho, but then again with my luck, anything's possible. And Colorado. I can go skiing. Yeah right, but Diana did say that demon and vampire populations are extremely low there. Similar to D.C. No way in hell am I going to D.C. So, Portland, anywhere in Kansas, anywhere in Colorado, or oh, Wyoming. Choices, choices. Okay, how about I do this? Said Faith as she closed her eyes. Wherever my finger lands, that's where I go. Faith hovered her finger over the map of the United States, and then dropped it gently on a random spot before opening her eyes. Oh hell no, said Faith when she found she landed on Las Vegas. Demons and vampires, especially vengeance demons. No thanks. One more time. Faith did it again, and this time, she smiled when she found out where her finger landed. Ah, Colorado Springs, said Faith to herself as she started driving again. Good place to live, hide out, whatever it is. Last place. Anyone will wanna look for me. Ta-ta Sunnydale, hope you fall into the Hellmouth. To be continued.